photograph was this the earliest? Now this does look pretty glamorous.
It does.
Is that the New York skyline we can see there?
That's the New York skyline. That was the view from my very unglamorous hostel window. I lived in a women's hostel. So when I graduated from Kingston University, in fact, the Easter holidays before I graduated, I used my grant in the days when you used to get a grant from the government to study. I used my grant and I booked myself flights. My friend and I booked flights out to New York, and we slept on the floor of some graduates from Kingston who'd left the year before us and had got jobs in New York. And we kind of crashed their tiny apartment in, I think it was the hottest summer on record with no aircon. So talk about another culture shock. This was another culture shock. And so we went out there in the Easter holidays. We went to visit a recruitment agent who typically would have come to Kingston to see us and would have picked the cream of the crop to place in jobs in New York. And we decided, well, why would we wait to be kind of maybe halfway down the list or maybe towards the end of the list when we can go and see her and put ourselves at the front of the line? And so we did. And we went to see her on day one. And I think by lunchtime on day one, we'd both been for interviews and both been offered jobs with the same company. And I got offered menswear design assistant, and my friend got offered women's wear design assistant. So we had to phone home from a call box and phone my dad and my mum and dad and say, guess what? And they thought we were going to say, we've landed, we've arrived. And we said, we've got jobs. So that was really exciting. And it just meant we had to come back to the UK, finish our degrees. And then we flew out in, I think, the July. After we didn't even go to our graduation. We went straight out and started working. And so, got a job as a menswear assistant with a company called American Eagle Outfitters, which was a tiny company when I got the job, but actually the first year that I was there, it grew 300%. It just was on such a growth trajectory. It was unbelievable. So it was fascinating to be in a high growth business at that time. And that picture is from the ladies' hostel that I lived in, which is where it's called the Webster Apartments. And most women, especially in fashion design, that leave the UK to go and work in New York, find themselves in the Webster Apartments.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's got a huge waiting list, but it's got a high turnover of people, and it's a place for women, professional women to live, and to have a safe base to live when you start out. So it was a really cool place to connect with other people, and I just met people from all over the world, and it was
like the London thing, only massively amplified.
So a really exciting time, and just being sort of, I think 23 I was, and suddenly living in New York City and being a fashion designer, it was just the most exciting time.
So talk us through a typical day as a New York, because we all want to know what do you actually do?
It was crazy. I mean, even just, the fact that I'd, again, never been to New York until the time that I went there and got an interview and got a job, that was my only experience of having been there. I think we were there 4 or 5 days. So to sort of move there and live there just felt like you were on a movie set, because my only experience of having seen New York would have been in films. So it was very much, we got up in the morning, we had breakfast at the hostel, we went and got our litre of coffee or whatever people get, and you walk to work and everybody's walking in the same direction to work, and got in an elevator that took you up 35 floors to your design studio. Set up for the day, to get my brief at the start of the day from the designers that I was supporting. And it was like digital technology was just starting to come in. I remember I got my first email address in that job. And it was like, wow, this is so modern.
This will never catch up.
Yeah. Who am I going to send emails to? And I'm waiting for an email to come through. It was dead exciting to get your first email. And actually even the art of fashion design was still hand drawn. We were using felt tips to colour in. We were using glue to glue images to boards. Really? So it was still very, very the traditional art of fashion design. And probably in that first year when I was there, when it grew 300%, we stopped sitting around a circular table together and colouring in with pens, and we all got individual booths and computer screens each. And you could see in that year, not just the company grow, but the whole landscape of what it meant to be a designer changed in that year. And it never ever went back to, I only got that little taste of what had been like previously.
And was that entirely a positive change? Because it sounds like there are some elements of those early days that were were really good, and you kind of maybe missed them.
I did, because I think if you think back to my sort of link to cut and stick and my sort of collage of, you know, being a little kid, that was quite similar to the job that I ended up doing. But as soon as you turn that into a digital activity, it very much changed what the job was about. So it probably was just, if I'm honest, just another sort of tick on the list as to looking for another avenue within the fashion industry. Right. It wasn't the be all and end all, but it was so much of the job was liaising with factories and, you know, all things that fashion designers do. It's a really broad and varied role, but it didn't interest me as much as the front end of the process, which was, who is our customer? What are they going to do next? Why are they buying this versus that? And at that time in New York, there was, I mean, Abercrombie and Fitch was massive. They were growing faster and bigger than we were, and we were sort of on their coattails at the time. And, you know, there was a big thing for vintage clothing, so I would get sent out to vintage fairs to buy vintage leather jackets, vintage t-shirts, vintage shorts, anything that I thought was going to be something we could replicate and design a version of that would be popular. So I loved that bit of it. I loved the trend forecasting, the thinking about what do we do next, feeding the designers the inspiration to do something next with. So I knew that had to be my next step, really.